It's 3 a.m. You're staring at the ceiling, wide awake. Your heart isn't racing. Your mind isn't spiraling. You're just there, suspended in the quiet, and the clock won't move. You roll over, check your phone, calculate how few hours of sleep you have left. You feel broken, defective, like your body has forgotten how to do the one thing it's supposed to know how to do. But here's what almost no one realizes. For most of human history, 3 a.m. wasn't a problem. It was an appointment. In 2001, a historian at Virginia Tech named Roger E. Kirch published a paper that quietly upended everything we thought we knew about sleep. He had spent 16 years digging through diaries, court records, medical manuals, novels, and church documents from medieval Europe. He found something extraordinary. Over 500 references to a phenomenon nobody alive today seemed to remember. Humans used to sleep in two pieces. People went to bed around 9 or 10 in the evening. They slept for roughly 4 hours. Then, around midnight, they woke up. Not from a nightmare, not from anxiety, but naturally, the way you wake from a finished meal. They stayed awake for 1 to 2 hours, and then they returned to bed for what was called second sleep, which lasted until dawn. This wasn't rare. This wasn't a quirk of one village. It was simply how people slept. Across England, France, Italy, Africa, the Middle East, the Americas. In nearly every pre-industrial culture E. Kirch examined, the same pattern appeared. The first sleep, the watch, the second sleep. And what's stranger is what people did in that middle space. They prayed, they wrote, they made love. A 16th century French physician's manual specifically recommended sex during the watch, claiming it was the most fertile and pleasurable window of the night. They visited neighbors in the dark. They brewed beer. They read by candlelight. Mothers nursed children. Some simply lay in bed and thought, letting the mind drift through what had happened that day and what would happen the next. The hour between sleeps was considered the most contemplative time a human being could experience. But that's just the surface. Because if you go further back, before electricity, before clocks, before even the idea of bedtime existed, sleep wasn't just biphasic. It was something else entirely. In the 1990s, an anthropologist named Polly Wiesner began decades of research with the Jew/Honsi Bushmen of southern Africa, one of the few human groups whose lifestyle still resembles that of our ancestors before agriculture. She recorded thousands of hours of conversation, and she noticed something nobody had documented before. Day conversation and night conversation were not the same. During the day, the Jew/Honsi talked about practical things. Who was hunting what? Disputes over food, marriages, logistics, daily survival. The talk was sharp, fast, often argumentative. But at night, gathered around the fire, something shifted. 81% of nighttime conversations were stories, myth, legend, ancestors, spirit world, the dead, the strange. The fire talk was slow, dreamlike, communal. Children fell asleep listening. Adults entered trance states. Songs were sung. Names of the dead were spoken aloud. The boundary between waking and dream grew thin. The night was when culture itself was transmitted, generation to generation, the flickering space where the visible world dissolved. In other words, ancient humans didn't just sleep at night, they imagined at night. The fire was a portal, and every human group on the planet had one. Then there's the question of how much they actually slept, because most people assume that before electric light, humans slept far more than we do. 12 hours, easily. We assume our modern exhaustion is the price of modernity. And that's also wrong. In 2015, a neuroscientist named Jerome Siegel at UCLA published a study in the journal Current Biology that shocked the sleep research community. He fitted modern hunter-gatherer groups, the Hadza of Tanzania, the San of Namibia, the Tsimane of Bolivia, with sleep-tracking devices. These are people who live without electricity, without screens, without alarm clocks, in conditions extremely close to those of our deep ancestors. The result was the opposite of what everyone expected. They slept an average of 6.5 hours per night, less than the average American. And almost none of them experienced what we would call insomnia. The word didn't even exist in their languages. They went to bed 3 hours after sunset, not at sunset. They woke before dawn. The cold of the early morning, not the light, was what pulled them out of sleep. And in the middle of the night, many of them woke briefly, tended the fire, exchanged a few words, and drifted back to sleep without alarm. The picture that emerges from all of this is something almost no modern person experiences. Night for ancient humans wasn't a void to be unconscious through. It was an active space, a second life, lived in lower light. There was conversation, sex, ritual, story, contemplation, and dreaming, all woven together into a rhythm the body recognized as natural. And then we erased it. The shift began in the late 1600s, when streetlights first appeared in European cities. It accelerated through the Industrial Revolution, when factories needed workers awake on rigid schedules. And it completed itself with Edison's bulb, which extended daylight indefinitely and compressed sleep into a single hard block of unconsciousness. By the early 20th century, references to first sleep and second sleep had disappeared from the language entirely. Within 3 generations, an architecture humans had used for tens of thousands of years was gone. But it didn't leave your body. In the early 1990s, a psychiatrist at the National Institute of Mental Health named Thomas Ware designed an experiment to test what would happen if modern humans were stripped of artificial light. He recruited a group of volunteers and placed them in environments where they experienced 14 hours of darkness every night for a full month, conditions roughly matching what humans would have lived in before electricity. The results were striking. For the first 3 weeks, the subjects simply slept longer than usual, paying off what Vare called modern sleep debt. But by week 4, something else happened. Their sleep split. They began going to bed earlier, sleeping for about 4 hours, waking in the middle of the night for 1 to 2 hours of calm, quiet wakefulness, and then returning for a second sleep that lasted until morning. The biphasic pattern reappeared on its own, as if it had been waiting underneath, dormant the whole time. And what subjects reported during the watch hour was even more striking, a state of peaceful contemplation unlike anything they had experienced in their daily lives, almost meditative. Some described it as the most relaxed they had ever felt, which raises an uncomfortable question. When you wake at 3 a.m. and feel that something is wrong, that you're broken, that your body has failed you, what if the opposite is true? What if the part of you that wakes in the dark is the oldest, most intact part of you, the part that hasn't yet been overwritten by clocks and shifts and the demand to sleep efficiently? The watch between sleeps was the most human hour of the day. It was the hour for prayer, for love, for stories told by firelight, for the slow drift of a mind unhurried by anything. We didn't invent night to sleep through it. We invented it to live a second, quieter life inside it. And every time your eyes open at 3 a.m. in a dark bedroom, with no reason and no alarm, something in you is remembering a world we forgot how to live in. You aren't broken, you're just early.